Hello and welcome back to Web Design for Small Business. In this video, part 22, Account Changes, we're going to be reviewing what we did in the previous video where we added jQuery elements to our account page, add a couple more tweaks to it that we left out because the last video was getting far too long as it was. And then we're going to create the PHP backend that will actually process the changes. So to start, we have our account page, and there's just a few things that we have wrong. So the first thing is with our phone number here. So it formats our phone number just nicely. However, if our number is short, what it'll do is it'll actually leave it short and just pop an X in there. So that is not good, because we can end up with non-functioning phone numbers where we're missing a couple digits, and because it accepted the change, the users won't actually know that there was anything wrong with it. They can submit that, and then we have a missing field, which is that phone number. We would not actually have a phone number for the client, so we want to fix that. The other thing is just a quick addition to what we did with the email, where we're just going to enforce that all the characters are lowercase. So right now we could have uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. However, because email addresses are not case sensitive, meaning that you can put uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. We want it all lowercase just to make it easier to read, because that is significantly harder to read than that. So we'll implement that, and then lastly, when we make changes or don't make changes, our button here just pops in and out. And we want to give it a fading effect, just so that it's not as harsh when it does that popping. And that is something we can very easily do with jQuery. Okay. And then after that, we'll get to the update page. So we'll go into our NetBeans, and on our account page, find our email.keyup function. And after we grab our email and create an email variable with the change, we're going to create a new line underneath that. And this line is going to be email is equal to email dot to lowercase camel caps, so the L and the C are capital, parentheses, semicolon. And then we're going to apply that, so $, parentheses, double quotes, pound, email, outside the parentheses, dot val, parentheses, semicolon, inside the parentheses, email. And save that, and go to our web browser, refresh that, and we'll just try to delete everything and go type in a capital O, and you see as soon as we put in a capital, it changes it to a lowercase. Okay, so on to the next one. We want the buttons to fade. So up at the top, we have update show. So where this says show and hide, we're going to change the show to fade in. Again, that's camel cap, so it's a capital I, and hide to fade out. Now, if you want, this is basically the default fade in and fade out. You can actually change the speed at which those fade in and fade out. You can do it one of two ways. Within the parentheses, you can either put a numerical value, which will be the amount of time for the animation to play in microseconds. Sorry, milliseconds. Or you can put double quotes and either the word slow or fast. But I'm going to leave it as default for now. And now we'll just go and check that. So now if I delete that, refresh, let's delete that one. So it fades out, fades in. Now there is a popping when the button, the clear button moves in, but we're going to have to deal with that. The only other way we could avoid that, because these are right aligned, so that clear button wants to move where the submit button was, we could change the placement of that so that the submit button was on the other side. But I tend to like to keep the corner for the positive button, so the button that does something, as opposed to the button that undoes things. I don't like to keep that in the corner because it makes it easier for people to accidentally hit it. One thing we could do for that is, instead of having it actually reset, we could have that create a new pop-up, and then within that pop-up have to confirm or cancel. But a lot of people also really hate multiple steps, so where it's just clearing changes, typically you're not changing everything altogether, so I will just leave it like that. Okay, so now our last thing is checking if our phone number is less than 15 characters. So in our phone number here, so find this line: if phone.length is less than 17, phone is equal to phone.substring in the brackets 0, 15. So we start at the first digit and we go 15 digits in, or 15 characters in. Sorry, it's a string, so it's characters. Okay, after this, what we want to do is create another if statement. If phone dot length is less than 16 characters, so we actually want this to be less than 15. Okay, so if the phone dot length is less than 15 characters, then we want it to do something else. So what we want is we want to undo our changes and give it an error message. And this line is getting excessively long, so I'm going to break this down here. And there. Okay, so do all that, but we also, because nowhere in here did we actually call the change variable, so we need to call that too. So we need our var change. So change is equal to the value of our change. Then we replace phone, comma, with nothing. Change our change value. And phone remove class has success. And then we're going to add class has error. Now, because we have an area that has error as well, we need to remove class has error, and here where we remove class has success, we also remove class has error. Okay, save that out and just test that. Refresh. So if I take our phone number, delete 2 characters from it, hit tab. Now it doesn't recognize it as a change, it gives us the error, so we know we have to go in and fix that. Having that X there actually kind of helps because it shows that there is something wrong. So we can go in and fix that to a number it likes and submit the change. Alright, so now we got that the way we like it. And we can go in now and create the actual update page. So going back here, we're just going to scroll up. Scroll down to our page content, and we're looking for this. So what do we call it? We called it update cust.php. Now, if you remember before, in the last video, every once in a while, instead of hitting tab to go to the next field, I'd hit enter. If you hit enter on a form, it will automatically submit the form. So because our submit changes is set to submit, it's basically like clicking that button. And because we had it set to update cust, but that file didn't exist, that's why I was getting an error message. So if you see an error message, it's because we're submitting the form instead of going to the next field, and we didn't create the file that it's trying to go to. So inside our resources, we create a new PHP file named update cust. And now we can cheat a little bit by going into our reg.php, or whatever you called the equivalent page for the registration. And we're going to copy everything from there and paste it into here. So basically what this would do by default is it would copy everything in our in the form that we submitted. So every single field, it would take them all and it would add them as a new client, basically. And that's not what we want at all. So the first thing we need to do is, okay, so this stuff at the top, we want to keep all that. And then where we get here and we're asking for variables, that's where we want to start doing something different. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get our new variable that we created, which if you don't remember what that's called, we can close that reg, was this hidden input field, our change. So I'm just going to call this changes, plural, filter input post change filter callback options in square brackets, arrow, which is equals and greater than, and data secure. Okay, so the first thing we do is we pull up our changes list. However, if you remember what that would actually create, we can go back and I'll show you. So right now we have the phone number. Let's change our email address as well. And maybe we'll change our last name here. Okay, so we've changed a few fields. If you right click and go to inspect, or Control Shift I is the shortcut, that brings up this lower panel that I go to all the time. And in here, you can click on the little arrow beside the body and go to the div class container page content. And under that, you get our panel default, panel body, form, and right under the form line, we see this input, hidden change. So while it's not displayed here, it's still displayed in the source code. So the value is phone, email, lname, comma. So what we can do is this is basically comma separated values. So we can actually turn this into an array. The problem is that the way it detects what the values are is by having the comma separator. So it'll actually give us 4 variables because of this trailing comma. So it'll give us phone, email, lname, and then a null value as a 4th one. And we don't want that null value. So what we need to do is we need to trim off that last comma. So how we do that is with the chop filter. So chop, left parenthesis, go to the end, add a right parenthesis, and then just inside that closing parenthesis, we go comma and single quotes and comma inside the single quotes. So what this is going to do is it's going to chop our string, or chop, I guess, the second element out of the first element. So our first element being our change variable, or our change string, and then the second one being the comma. So that will remove the comma from the end, because chop basically chops something off the end of the string. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to convert that. So what we do is we use another filter called string str underscore get CSV. So get CSV is all one word together, and string str, so just the short form, str underscore get CSV, then parentheses in both of those. Now you can also use this to create arrays that aren't comma separated values, that have something else like a hyphen or a vertical bar separating them, but you would need to add another element behind it. However, the default is always a comma. So if we're using commas, which you should be in the habit of doing, then you don't need to do anything extra, and it makes your code just that much cleaner. So now our changes variable will actually be an array of the different values. So now underneath this, we don't want to check for every single variable, because we only want to affect the variables that have changed. For example, the password. If they didn't enter a new password or change that, this is going to pick up a blank password by default because we don't show that password. And then it will actually change it to a blank password, and then anybody going in can just log in using your username and no password. So that's really bad. For each, all one word, parentheses, curly bracers. Inside the parentheses, our changes variable as, all lowercase, $V. So for each, changes variable as V variable. Okay, so what this does is it takes each key and value pair in here, and it will loop through the keys and give us allow us to use the value of the current key as this V variable. And because this is an indexed array, the keys are simply numeric 0, 1, 2, and so on and so forth. So then what we want to do is break that down, and we go switch V and then what we want to do is we want to cut and paste these guys and I left out this reg IP. We're going to cut that, give that just a space there. We're going to put this up at the top above our changes. So we're going to keep that there, and we're just going to comment that out. So it doesn't actually check the IP address. We're not just deleting it, we're going to leave it there. If I'm not completely sick of the tutorial by the time I get through everything, we might come back and I can show you how to create a IP address blacklist, and then we can basically compare this to that, and then if it fails, we don't allow changes. So basically, if their IP address is blocked, we don't let them make account changes for security purposes. All right, but that's getting more advanced, so we'll see how it goes with time. If we don't get to it, you can just delete that line, or really any line that's commented out at the end of the tutorial series. Okay, so going back, so now we have all of these within here, and we're just going to tab them out. Okay. Now, if you remember from previously when we were using switches, they need to start with a case and then a value for whatever this is and a colon. So for each line here, what we're going to be doing is exactly that. So case, single quotes, colon. And I'm going to copy that and paste. Now, if you're wondering how I'm doing this so quickly, remember, if you copy something and then it goes back here and you manually go to the back of it and then go down and paste, when you paste, it will bring you, when you hit the down arrow, sorry, afterwards, it will bring you back down instead of dropping you kind of immediately from where you are. It will go to where it started at, so you can quickly do these kind of pastes. Okay, so in each of these we need the name of the variable, which is this guy here. So what's in there needs to be what's in our case, because that's how and we can actually, delete password 2, because at no point did we ever pass password 2 in. it was passed as password. So then this one should be password, and again, there is no password too. Okay, delete that line. Now what we need is at the end of each of these, we need a space, break, semicolon. Copy that. And when you hit down here, it will bring you to the next line unless the line is longer. Sometimes it won't in that case. But this one seems to be letting me do it anyway, which is nice. Okay. So there we go. So now basically what this does, this whole thing here, is it checks to see if the variable is included in our changes. If it is, then it pulls it from the post and assigns it to its variable. Nothing else will actually process, just the ones that are listed in our changes. So what do we do with all the other ones? So after changes and before our for each, we want to create another new line, and in here we want to set each of our variables but have them all be blank. Again, we can skip password 2 because we do not need that, and just set each one to equal each other. And then the last one is equal to just double single quotes and a semicolon. So basically we've created every single variable and just set it to blank, and then when we go through here, what we'll do is when we're setting it, it will overwrite this blank, but each of these variables will have been created to prevent error messages. So then what we can do is go through and check to see if a variable exists, and then if it does, change it in the database. So we don't need to check for that. Because we're not concerning ourselves with 2 passwords, just the one. Because we use jQuery to determine whether or not the 2 passwords were the same. Okay, I'm going to delete this one too because we're going to cover that in the next video as to why. And none of the values would be blank because then they would have failed the jQuery and not been able to submit. And there shouldn't be any error messages yet, so we don't need to check for errors. So we can delete that one. Now we're not adding anything, so we can delete that one. And we'll delete that one as well. Okay, so we have messages at the end for success or failure. And now we need to go and actually set our variables. So what we do is we have to kind of manually go through this for each one. So we'll start with the username. So if username and we just leave it as that because we're checking if it's set. Curly bracers. Call it UD1. Double quotes. And update customers, because that is what we called this table, customers. Set single quotes, no, sorry, set username, not in any type of quotes, is equal to, and then single quotes. And then inside our single quotes, pair of dots. Sorry. Inside the single quotes, pair of double quotes and pair of dots. And inside that, username. However, we have to encrypt this. So we go data encode 2 and brackets. Then we hit enter and we type if parentheses, inside the parentheses, MySQLi query. So MySQLi MySQLi underscore QUERY. MySQLi query parentheses. Inside those parentheses, we do our database, highway 45, capital DB, comma, and our UD1. And triple equal, space, false, all uppercase, space, curly bracers, dollar sign, lowercase e, capital M, SG, e-message, set to, error changing username. Colon, space, after the single quote, put a dot, and MySQLi underscore error, close parentheses, semicolon. Enter, else, curly bracers. Inside the curly bracers, dollar sign C MSG is equal to single quotes, semicolon, inside the single quotes, username updated, successfully. And that is it. So if it exists, then update our database with, ooh, I have made this mistake once before and it was horrible. So update customers, set username to that. However, we didn't specify where to update that. When you don't specify which row to change, it changes it in all of the rows. So if somebody went in to, after we did this, to change their username, it would change everybody's username to this. And that can be a nightmare. So after this single quote, space, capital letters, where, space, ID, is equal to single quotes. Okay. And in those single quotes, we need to put the user's ID, which is, so single quotes, inside the single quotes, double quotes, inside the double quotes, double dots. Inside that is $C, square brackets, inside the square brackets, single quotes, inside the single quotes, ID. Because the IDs are unique and unencrypted, so that's what we're going to use to verify each user when we're entering their data. Very important not to leave that out. I only ever made that mistake once, and I just about made it again here in this tutorial, which is fairly embarrassing. But I'm leaving it in as a very important reminder of how very, very important that is. Okay, so now what we can do is we can just copy and paste this and do the same for each of these. Okay, so the next one, password. Password, and I believe I actually still call this password 1. Just make sure that's password 1. Password 1. However, password 1, we use the one-way encryption, so we make sure we change that to data encode 1. And then changing the username, we change that to changing the password. And this to password. Then what we want to do is we want to change the UD1 to UD2. And I just jumped lines there. So UD1 to UD2, there and there in the two spots. Password, password, password 1, password 1, password. Okay. Next one is fname. This becomes UD3, UD3, fname, fname. In this, because these are actual messages, we want to actually write out first name, next one is lname. Here on 4. Lname B4. Error changing last name. Last name. Phone. UD5. Phone. UD5. Error changing phone number. Phone number updated successfully. 6. Email 6. Email address. Email address. City. City. No, address, sorry. Address 1. 7. Address 1. Seven. And I'm just going to keep that as address. Okay. Now for address 2, I'm going to delete this one. And I'm going to copy address 1 and paste it. Eight. Two. Okay, and leave that as address. Now, the thing with address 2, this is one of our special cases where it is the only field we have that doesn't need to have anything in it. It can be blank. So checking to see if it has anything in it isn't going to work. So what we need to do is we need to see if changes has, because this value still exists, so if changes has anything as a value of address 2. Right? Now, the easiest and simplest way of doing that is in here where we're checking to see if any of these values were address 2 here, we can do something to put in a variable there. So where we have address 2 here, we're going to put in A2 is set to 1. And then up here where we have our variables, you can either add A2 there, but I want to make it, actually, yeah, we can just do that. A2 is equal to. So we're just going to add that to our created variables that are null. And here we're just giving it a value of 1. So then in here, that's what we're going to check to see if it exists. So if A2 exists, then set this to this. However, if it is blank, we don't want to encode a blank string. We want to just leave the field blank altogether. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to check to see if this is empty, and if it isn't, then encode it. So if address if address 2, then address 2 is set to data encode address 2. Semicolon. So we're just going to add that up in this empty space here above it. That way it doesn't take up extra space and our flow kind of stays the same, and there's space for it there. Then in here, we simply write address 2. So what this will do is, if address 2 exists, so if it's not blank, then we're going to change it to the encoded value. So we're going to encode data, we're going to 2A encode address 2 and then store that back into our address 2. So our address 2 is now the encrypted version of itself. If it's not set, so if it's blank, it will just stay blank. And then that's what we're applying there. So if it's blank, it stays blank. If it's not blank, it'll be the encrypted one. Okay, now we go to city. And this is now 9. 9. City. And our city isn't encoded, so we delete that. City. Error changing city. City. Province. Province again isn't encrypted. Province. And when you're done, just go through and double check all the fields again. Sometimes you might miss one and that'll give you errors because then you're changing the wrong fields and putting provinces and username fields and usernames and provinces. So, for example, we're at 10 now. Okay. Oops. Sorry, I got province stuck in my head. Okay, so save that. Now at the bottom here, we have it go to the account if it's successful, and if it's not successful, go to register. We're going to actually change that. So if it's unsuccessful, we go to account. And if it is successful, we're going to send them back out to the main page. Actually, we'll keep them at account for both of them. And because we're actually doing that, we can just simplify this. So if it's an error message, create an error message. Otherwise, create a confirmation message. And then kick them out back to the account page and exit. And there we go. That page is done. You can go ahead and test it and see if you can now edit pages or edit customer data. So up at the very top, we kept this validate register thing. So what that does is it enforces that we come from our register page. However, we didn't come from our register page, we came from our account page, and that's why it was actually kicking me back out. So to fix that, remember this is now called update in value of 1. So here, instead of register, we need to change that to update. Save that. Okay. So now if you tried to test this and found that it wasn't doing any updates, there is a very good explanation for that. The main one being that in order for it to update any of these things, it updates it where the ID is equal to our customer ID. However, this value, this customer value, is not actually set. And why is that? Because this page, while we require our core file, our actual request for the customer information, so where we actually pull that from, we have set in this file. So what we want to do is we actually want to remove that. So that, paste it on top there. So this chunk of code right here is where we get the cookie that has our user information in it, so where our login information is stored, and gets the client data from that cookie and creates this customer variable that we then go in and use. This is all set on this page, which is used in every single page throughout the site, except ones that we directly access, like our account page, for example. So what we need to do, so while this one, because it's within the regular PHP, works, but the update cost won't work because it's not set, either we have to copy and paste that information into here, or because we are requiring this core file from our secure site, we can just paste that information into the secure site. So that's what we're going to do. So if you go into your control panel and go into the file manager and go to whatever you named your secure folder. Sorry, here we go. So in the file manager, you should have these files: connect, core, encryption, and key. We're going to edit our core file. And in here, we're going to add at the bottom we're going to call it customer persistence. I like to label things so that I know what everything is for. Oh, and I only copied the one. So go in here, go into this file, cut this, delete. So save that, temporarily breaking your entire website. Paste that in there. That. Delete all that extra white space that we don't need. Save those changes. Close that out. And go back to our page, refresh it. With any luck, nothing changed. If it logged you out or you're getting any error messages, might not have done it properly. So just double check that. But now we should have this working. So we're going to try again. Submit changes. And now you can see those changes have actually gone through, which is what I wanted. Perfect. So now we can go in and change. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to go and revisit our registration page and put in all the changes that we made for the update page here into our registration page with a couple tweaks. And one thing that we're going to do is on both, so on the My Account and on the registration page, is we're going to create an algorithm or a search function basically that will use Ajax for the first time. And what it will do is it will check our database to see if whatever username they type in is already existing, and if so, then basically give them that red error box, and if it's acceptable, give them a green box. So we will test to see if the username is already taken. Alright, until the next video,